Hi, thank you for tuning in to the Logic of God podcast. I'm Cody.
I'm Gina.
And I'm Ben.
If you're returning, thank you for coming back. And if you are a new guest, welcome.
So we've now made it through the way of life. And now starting in chapter 5, we are in the way of death.
Dun, dun, dun.
A very dramatic.
Jinx, you want me to say that? So why do you think the author put the way of life before the way of death? Because a lot of times I feel like we are taught in the opposite of like sin, 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 and then Jesus is the way, the truth, the life. Do you think it was meaningful? Is that a model for pastoral teaching today that we should take note of?
I think for many people, they live their lives in the way of death. It's important to touch on, but for the people who are already in the way of death, it's important to introduce them to the way of life first. You don't need to tell them all the things that they've done wrong and then tell them how to do it right. You start off with, I recognize that you, like the rest of us, are sinners, and you recognize that you're a sinner because you become a part of the church. This is the way of life. This is the way to receive life. These are the things that you ought to do. And then to follow that up with, this is where you're coming from. This is what you've left behind. And it's a reminder, and it's an important one. And you'll notice the way of life was fairly long. The way of death is much shorter.
Yeah.
It's basically a chapter.
One thing that stands out to me with this entire exploration of the Didache is that the way of life kind of transitioned into this fatherly, like my child language. And it reminds me of the way that a parent would instruct a child. And when you go to teach a child, like when I go to teach our children, I'm not like, hey, Ellie, when you go to make a friend, don't punch them in the face. Like, no, I'm like, say hi. And the instruction is more like from the perspective of starting correctly instead of from the perspective of starting weird. And I think that's the thing that's afforded to us in salvation is this like fresh start of being a child of God. And God is basically saying, or the author of the Didache is basically saying, you're made new already. So like you can forget that old way, but we will address the old way, but like we're going to treat you like a child because you are spiritually a child.
It is also, I think, very difficult to do what's right and very easy to fall into what's wrong. And so, like, there's a reason why it takes so long to teach not just children, but, my oldest brother's in the military, and he's talked about how for a lot of recruits who go into the lowest levels of service, they haven't really had any education generally, but also in terms of morality. You're trying to teach them honor and discipline and respect. And for many of these guys, this is the first taste they've ever had of it. And so it takes, months and months for you to drill into them the basics of essentially morality. And you're not even starting off with morality. You're starting off with do X. And if you don't do X, it's going to be a bad time. And once you get the basics of what you need to do drilled into them, then you can explain why. But you can't start with why because they don't understand. You have to start with this is what you do. And so I do think I see a little bit of that in the way of life being as long as it is versus the way of death. The way of life is difficult. It's straight and it's narrow. And the way of death is very easy. It's the way that many of these people have come from. And it's something that we all fall into oftentimes without even thinking about it.
It's funny because like in this chapter of the Didache, it lists the characteristics. So characteristics of the way of death are murders, adulteries, lusts, fornicators, thefts, idolatries, magic, sorcery, robberies, false witness, hypocrisy, duplicity, deceit, pride, malice, stubbornness, greed, obscene speech, jealousy, insolence, arrogance, boastfulness, and lack of fear of God. Plus. So some of these are like, of course I'm not a murderer. Of course I'm not going to steal. But then stubbornness, obscene speech, I am the first to admit that I love a well-placed swear word. I have such a hard time with some of these. And I think that's where the Christians in America, especially today, are like, well, but what really are these? Like, what classifies or qualifies what is coming out of my mouth or what is going on in my brain as the way of death versus the way of life? How can I prove to myself which is which? Because I don't want to be dual-minded. I don't want to have duplicity like this is saying. And so how can I really discern if that's what's happening?
How can you discern that?
Yeah, Cody, why is it okay that I drop an F-bomb occasionally?
Well, I don't really think that is what Scripture means by obscene language. Like there's a difference between using language in the way that it was meant for emphasis and not vulgarness. Then there's a way to speak vulgarly that is not beneficial to anybody. Like there's a way where I think cuss words are appropriate for the time and place and situation that you're in. There's certain words that I think aren't ever to be used, but those have no value or emphasis in what they are, and they're meant to tear down. But like idiot is commonly used and not frowned upon by even the culture today, but I think that's worse than saying the S word or F word. Like calling somebody an idiot, tearing them down, like that is much more harmful and sinful, I think, than saying the S word.
Well, and you can sense the attempt of the more purist Christian culture to try to get around it by using words like heck instead of hell, or any number of the other substitutes that we have.
Oh
Jiminy, all cripers, gosh, oh golly. It's like they are substitute words that mean the same thing,
right?
But because it's not the actual word, you're okay. It's a nonsense word that doesn't mean anything. It's like how in an attempt to never ever use the Lord's name in vain, they came up with Jehovah, which is a word that doesn't mean anything, rather than saying Yahweh. Because if you never use the name, then you can never use the name in vain. And yet we ended up using Jehovah anyway. It becomes associated with God. It's his name now, even if it's a word that doesn't mean anything. And so saying, I swear to Jehovah, oh, dude, you just took the Lord's name in vain if you say that jokingly.
No, and I think that's the importance of language. And like one of my main base studies right now is the importance and just variance in language and true intent behind that. Like, you can say something, you can talk about belief or faith, and that means something completely different to you than it does to me. But when we use words like gosh or darn or something, like the true intent is still there. Like the intention behind that word is still a placeholder, at least for what it is. And that's why Jehovah became God. Like, what is the intention behind using Jehovah instead of Yahweh? Like, it's still the same. Like, you're still pointing to God in that sense.
Yeah, in so many situations, we've seen the original replacement word become the derogative. Like, gay was meant to be a kind of, nice way of saying homosexual, and then it became a derogatory phrase.
Well, and it didn't even start out meaning that. It was a word that meant happy.
Correct. And it changed and was used as a polite way of saying something. Idiot and stupid and some of these other words were meant to be replacement words for the mentally disabled or the people who were like retarded. Literally was meant to be the polite word for someone who was struggling mentally.
Well, it's like now, deaf versus hard of hearing versus hearing impaired. There are so many different ways of saying things. And now anymore, it's like you never know what's going to offend people, or like black versus African American. Mm-hmm. Anything can be taken derogatory.
Or colored person versus person of color. And if you say one, you're being racist. And if you say the other, you're being politically correct. But nobody really knows why or what we're supposed to say. It's important to know that words have power. I'm not saying that we should go around saying cuss words for every other syllable, but you have to understand what the purpose of a word is and why you're saying it. One of the main reasons that we don't say these words, especially in a family-friendly context, is because children are listening. And we don't say these words around children because children are innocent and they don't understand the use of things. There are a lot of things that I don't say around my niece or nephews. And it's because they don't understand and will take the words that I'm saying or the subjects that we're talking about and take them in the absolute wrong direction and cause damage either to themselves or the people around them, and potentially hurt other people's innocences when that's not the intention of the words. There's a certain point where we start bringing kids into the fold. They start to become young adults, and so they start to have greater understanding. And part of that greater understanding comes with responsibilities for the use of specific language that up until that point they were not allowed to use. So I used to be very against swearing. Now I'm not nearly as against it. I think that it's appropriate in certain contexts, certain words. Definitely at certain points in my life, I've used them and they felt right to use them then. And I wouldn't advocate using them constantly.
I want to give an example because I think it's probably shocking. So if you're one of the listeners who's been with us for a very long time, it may be hard to hear Gina swears and sometimes enjoys an emphatic swear word. And so I want to give you some examples so that you understand what I'm talking about, because this is not just, me trying to be unwholesome or something. My personal background comes from something a little rougher. And I have been, I was a first generation Christian. I became a Christian as an adult. My parents did not practice Christianity when I was growing up, and I had a very confusing home life in terms of religion. And so becoming a Christian at 25, actually, ironically, I'm coming up on my 10th anniversary from being baptized. It was difficult for me to go into church environments where people didn't speak the same language that I spoke, meaning that the swear words and some of the harsh language that I was familiar with and used to just from what I surrounded myself with and what I had been exposed to as a kid, it felt like I was unclean or dirty and unworthy to be in some of those circles. And if I shared some of the challenges and hard stuff I'd seen and been through, some people looked at me like I had 3 heads and they couldn't understand where I was from. And in my own ministry walk and in the grieving and the hurting that I've experienced as a Christian, since becoming a Christian, one of the things that really stood out to me is I've had several people kind of share with me that some of the Christians that they've shared their stories with kind of look at them and just blink. And they're like, I don't know what to do with you. Nothing bad like that has ever happened to me. And it's hard for me to even believe that that kind of a thing could happen. And nobody really met them where they were at in their roughness. And so I'm not saying that it's justified to be crude or crass or use your speech manipulatively or anything never to tear anybody down. But there was a couple one time that Cody and I mentored. He was a drug dealer. And they had a baby when they were 18, and he got kicked out of the military, and just lots and lots of trauma and just wretched experiences for this young man. And he sat with my husband, Cody, and told him how he felt like no father could ever love him. No father could ever accept him because he was too dirty. And he swore the whole time. He was cussing like a sailor. And if Cody had been like, well, golly gee willikers, I love you, this guy would have walked out of our house. We spoke his language. And I can't repeat the things that we said because they would be marked as explicit by the sensitive listeners who report us occasionally for saying things like bastardized. But we meet people where they are. And if that means speaking a language that is familiar to them to reach them, I'm going to do it. I'm going to say the swear word. I'm going to say humorous things or emphatic swear words. And I listen to music that's not always Christian. I am not of this world, but I want to seek people out for the Lord. And I'm going to speak whatever language it takes. And so do with that what you will. But I can tell you, if we did the whole whitewashed golly gee willikers thing for a lot of the people that we've talked to, their walk would not be what it is today.
No, my main problem with the whole cursing thing and it being just cuss words is I don't think people evaluate their true intention behind words and the context of scripture when it's talking about language and how you're supposed to use it to breed life, not death. Like that is the emphasis of not using curse words and being mindful of your language, and the vulgarness of it is what scripture is trying to teach. And growing up in the church, like, as kids, you try to be as creative as you can in a Christian household, trying to think of new words that replace the swear words, like fudge or frick. Like we all know what we're trying to say at that point. Like you hear it in your head. I guarantee you thought about it as soon as I said those. You knew what I was
It's
trying
all
to say.
associated.
And it doesn't change. But especially in church, I see it so much like the Pharisees and Sadducees, where these people say, well, I'm a better Christian than you because I don't cuss at all. I never cuss. I never fight with my wife. Like, I'm a better Christian than you. And it's weaponized as these, greater than thou people who just have no witness to the outside world because they're prudish in a lot of sense. And, cringe when you say a word that's in the English language that the Bible wouldn't be referencing at that time because it wasn't invented yet. And I'm sorry, Christ uses a lot of abrasive language.
So does Paul, yeah.
Yeah, like
Paul literally implies that you should remove your genitalia.
He tells people to go castrate themselves. Like Jesus, says, you brood of viper. Like that's not gentle language. Like that there is a time and place to use that language.
I mean, even David talking about bashing in babies' heads, like that's very offensive, but that's in Psalms.
Yeah, it's like the idea that you can talk about very dark and awful and disgusting things, but as long as you use the right words, it's okay. Whereas if you use the wrong words, then suddenly it's wrong, but it's not because of the subject matter, it's because of the words you use to talk about it. Like it's a strange thing. And I grew up in the church like you did, Cody, and there was a fear of words. And yet, despite that fear of words, there's the replacement words. Heck, fudge.
Yeah.
Shoot.
Shiitake mushrooms.
Yeah, I remember Spy Kids taught us that one.
Oh, yes, I love that. Everyone loved that. Every kid was saying shiitake mushrooms.
Yeah.
I think too, like looking at lust, fornicators, adulteries, like there's this movie, I think it's Forgetting Sarah Marshall, not a Christian movie.
No.
Well, I guess Russell Brand is a Christian now, right? So it's okay. We can watch it. No, I'm just playing. But there's this like really prudish man in the movie that like is on his honeymoon and having such a hard time with his sexuality with his new wife. And he makes some comment like, God put your mouth on your head for a reason. And it's just super uncomfortable. But like, that is sometimes how Christians treat sexuality in marriage. And I think a lot of Christians are afraid that having sexual thoughts is lustful in their marriage, like about their own spouse. And I think we have to take away some of that stigma because God designed sex to be between a husband and a wife. And I wish and this isn't the right platform, so I'm not going to go too deep in this, but stop worrying so much about having impure thoughts about your spouse. Like God gave you that spouse to have that fun with, and that is not a wrong thing. And if you were thinking about somebody other than your spouse, yes, that is adulterous. That is fornication. That is lust. But that is not what we have in marriage. And in all of the different retreats and mentoring and things that we've had with married couples as a husband and wife, Cody and I, that is one of the most prevalent things that we see is this terror at being okay with sexuality and Christianity in marriage.
That almost goes into this vulgar talk too, is one of the biggest hangups that I have with church marriage ministry is when they get to the sex talk, it's very clinical, it's very taboo. If they even say sex, it is,
people start leaving
and passing, and they curl up. It was designed to be a beautiful thing. It's a sacrament in the Catholic religion for a reason.
But even people the Bible has Song of Solomon. People treat that it's some kind of pornographic thing to be avoided. God gave that to us. If you think that's vulgar, it's in the Bible.
But we can't talk about vulgar things, Gina.
Like I just think, and okay, if this is something that you're listening and you're like, that's us, email us, please. We will help you. Because I think we get twisted and then we're like playing this religious OCD in our head of like unclean thoughts and bad words. And I have to be perfect and I have to perform. And the whole point of this Didache thing is not performative.
Well, and if you're a Christian listening to this, you're like, well, I just don't know. I don't ever feel comfortable saying bad words or, okay, that's fine. Really. I'm not trying to tell you that you need to.
Yeah.
I'm not.
This isn't go out and just start swearing.
I'm not telling anybody who currently feels uncomfortable saying swear words to swear. For me personally, I don't have a problem hearing the occasional swear word from Christians. I find it to be very honest, especially when it's done at the right time and it feels like it accentuates a moment in the proper way. However, every bad thing is a good thing that has been corrupted. If you're a Christian and you struggle with like sexual thoughts about your wife and you think that's evil, what's the good? What is the good version of things that is being corrupted? If the whole point is that we are built in part for sex, that's the way that we procreate, how we create the next generation. And that requires, a pleasurable act. If you feel like it's not supposed to be pleasurable, what?
We've got to talk about that.
Yeah.
It's hard because like, I can't say this for certain, but like, I do think one of the best things to do is have that outlet with your spouse. Like, because if you feel guilty about it with your spouse, then you're going to feel guilty about it with other women, but it's the same thing. You feel guilty no matter what, so your mind's going to wander. But if you have a honorable outlet, which you can think about your wife that way and not feel guilty about your wife that way, and you have this flourishing sexual relationship with your wife, like I think that would help a lot of the church struggle with pornography and unfaithfulness.
Our marriage and divorce rates are the same as everyone else. Christians are not special, and we should be.
No, we absolutely should be special. We should be exemplifying what a covenant actually is and not falling into the same rates as culture.
Right. So I want to read the second part here because I think this takes it even a little deeper into the nuances. So, okay, murder, fine. I'm not going to commit murder, but then also characteristic of the way of death. Persecutors of the good, haters of truth, lovers of falsehood, ignorant of righteousness, watchful, not for good, but for evil, far from meekness and patience, lovers of vanity, seekers of reward, without mercy for the poor, indifferent to the oppressed, not knowing their maker, child murderers, corrupters of God's creation, turning away from the needy, oppressing the afflicted, advocates of the rich and unjust judges of the poor, sinners in everything. Whoa.
Children, may you be delivered from all such people.
I can tell you already, just through social media, TikTok and all of that, lovers of vanity, I think as a whole country, we are lovers of vanity, seekers of reward.
Well, and for so many of these poor young women, and it is rough, I think, being a young lady today, but the sheer number of surgeries that you see, like I recently saw a video of this plastic surgeon reacting to images of women guessing their age and guessing if they'd had work done. And there were a bunch of women in their 20s and they all looked like they were in their 40s. And it's this attempt at vanity of desperately trying to hold on to a youth you haven't even lost yet, because with each passing year, you see a little bit of that youth drip away, and you are so terrified of losing it all because you feel like the world will only love you as long as you're young and beautiful, that you will hold on to a false version of it where you will look just, 40, but pretty for the rest of your life, rather than just allow yourself to be your age and grow old. And it is very difficult with this perpetually online culture, because for so many young ladies, they put a single picture out of themselves and then they're flooded with tons of men that they've never heard of and will never see, and who don't know them, telling them that they're beautiful and they're amazing and these guys would do anything for them. And then they think, well, I guess this is...
It's an addictive sort of power.
But it's conditioning them to believe that that is their worth. And that's not entirely their fault. That vanity doesn't come only from them. It also comes from the external pressure of the world telling them that that is their value.
Well, and like, I grew up fatherless as a girl. I grew up feeling very misunderstood by my family. And I can totally understand the draw to get approval wherever you can.
It's over 1 in 3 kids now in the United States, significantly higher than that. I think it's closer to 40% of all kids are born out of wedlock. What on earth do you think that's going to do? Not just to the girls, but to the boys. Without a firm father figure to be able to show you how to be a man, to be able to tame some of your harsher, more wild impulses, to channel them into something good.
Yeah, we have to master this as a church, like as the body. We have to, it's not just calling out lovers of vanity. It's not just saying, hey, stop freaking taking videos of yourself and posting it on the internet, because I just did that this week and I cringed at myself the whole time. But I had something I wanted to say. Stop painting your face and posting it on the internet. Okay, I can say that. I can cast that out there and judge. But then like, I need to evaluate, why are they doing that? What is lacking in them that I could be a light to? Where can I shine the light on the shadows in their life to help them to feel validated in their identity in the Lord rather than what the world is telling them they need to be? If we are just going to judge and condemn, then I think we fall into other lines here, like ignorant of righteousness and watchful, not for good, but for evil. Like, you have to balance it out. You can't just go condemning young girls on the internet for being vain when you're being cruel, when you're being indifferent, when you're being, when you're turning away from the needy, when you're oppressing the afflicted. Like, it's a vicious cycle here.
Well, exactly. The turning away from the needy, I think, is especially important because I think I've mentioned it before, but on occasion I see clips from a show called the Whatever Podcast. And it's basically just a show where there's a panel of a few guys and then it's mostly girls, and it's mostly girls who have OnlyFans accounts or are basically modern day prostitutes in one version or another, adult film actresses and things like that. And then they're brought on, they're usually very young. They have no positive male influence in their lives. If they have any kind of parental influence at all, it's just their mothers, potentially. And then they're brought on and asked all sorts of questions and they don't have any answers to them and they're made fun of relentlessly. They're chewed out because they don't have any answers to anything and they don't know any better. They're people who need guidance. And you can't be surprised if they don't have any positive influence in their life, especially not any positive masculine influence in their life, to help them to know how a man should treat them, to know what positive male attention is rather than just this generic male attention that they're getting from thousands of men. They don't know any better. And so how are you helping them? By just pointing and laughing and saying, well, I know better than you.
I'm so cool. Like, okay.
Yeah, how are you helping?
No, you're not. And I think that the one that stuck out to me the most was watchful, not for good, but for evil. Because, I mean, I think as Christians especially, and myself guilty of this as well, is like that cynicalness of like trying to pick out the bad or what somebody's doing wrong in everything. Like, oh, pastor said this, well, he's an idiot. Like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Like, but what good is there in that? Like where can you find the good in that person and highlight that? And 2, like what purpose are you serving just being cynical, picking out everybody's flaws, talking about everybody's flaws, and not doing anything to better the world at all?
Well, and believe me, I was there at one point. In some ways, I still do struggle with it. And I was the most useless Christian of all time when I was going through that period where I was hyperanalyzing everything and saying, well, that's wrong. That's stupid. You're doing something wrong. I'm not doing that wrong. Congratulations. Congratulations to me. I was the most perfect Christian of all time and I was useless. And there's still a part of me that's useless. And I'm trying very hard to go against that part of me who is useless. But that's what our striving should be as Christians. And, the whole judge not lest ye be judged. We talked about that before. That's the most poorly used poorly quoted section of the Bible of all time. No, we do recognize when things are wrong, but why do we point out something is wrong? Just to point out how much better we are than everyone else? Or do we do it because it's a sickness and you need to prescribe something for that illness? We need to know what the illness is first and then have a prescription, else they will be sick forever.
That's why I like ignorant of righteousness here, because it's not just that you don't know righteousness. Ignorance is almost willful. And it's like I've been praying for God to dismantle churches in our town that are corrupt, that have corrupt leadership. And that might be shocking to you. I know it was shocking to my women's Bible study group. I think I've shared on that before, but it's not good enough for me to just pray. Like, there is a certain call to action and accountability in the church. And that is outlined for us in the Bible in how we address conflict. And we have good models for that. But people forget that communication is a big part of that righteousness. And if we're not communicating or calling people up or encouraging people or using our spiritual gifts to pray for people, how can, you are being ignorant of righteousness. If you just sit and wait for God to deliver righteousness, you're not going to be fulfilled. He might deliver, but if he's put you in a place in such a time as this, what are you going to do?
No, and we can't be ignorant of righteousness because we're called to be righteous because our God is righteous. We have to be righteous.
And that doesn't mean just calling out other people who are not. It's evaluating ourselves.
No, how are you leading by example in righteousness? How are you showing the correct path? One of Paul's biggest...
Without arrogance, without boasting.
But one of his biggest pulls was and some people see it as arrogance and I see it too, but imitate Christ how I'm imitating Christ. I'm going around doing all this stuff. I could be asking you guys for tons of money right now, but I'm not. I'm making my own way, not to be a burden on you while teaching you, while walking the walk and talking the talk. If you're just back there criticizing and not living it out how it should be, how are they supposed to know?
Yeah, this way of death may be short, but I think it hits hard. I think it's very disheartening to see that even longtime Christians like us can be looking through the way of death and see things that we're guilty of, because that's how easy it is to fall into it. It's a massive trap, and the enemy's aware. And you said it at the start, Gina, some of the stuff, it seems silly. It's okay, how many of us are doing witchcraft, and how many of us are
robbing
idolaters
banks.
Or robbing banks or
killing people.
Mm-hmm.
But the second section, I feel this is directly at the church at large today.
Yes. Child murderers.
Persecutors of good, haters of truth, lovers of falsehood.
Far from meekness and patience.
And that far from meekness especially, it's there is a fear of actual strength. And in some way that's tied into the fear of language. It's you're afraid of your language being too strong, of having too much weight behind it. You have to keep it tame. You have to keep it weak, limp-wristed. And you can't use the full power of language because language has the power to hurt. And so if you exercise its full power, yes, there are absolutely going to be times where you hurt someone where you didn't intend to. But that's the point of meekness, is that you learn the strength of your abilities, your physical abilities, your mental abilities, your verbal acuity. And you learn to temper that with wisdom. You learn to hold it back because you need to understand power. You need to understand strength in order to understand humility. Jesus is the ultimate example of humility because he's the ultimate example of strength that he chose not to use.
Also status, above the angels, but made himself lower than that, in every way. He is the exemplar of humble meekness.
Yeah, this idea of humility, I feel today our version of humility is a person denying things they are. It's dude, you're the best swimmer on the US team. No, I'm not. I couldn't do it without my team. I couldn't do it without my team. Or, dude, you're so amazing at ping pong. Oh no, I'm a beginner at best. That's humility. No, that's false humility. If you really are good at something and you deny it, that's false humility. That's making yourself look good by playing yourself down. True humility is doing things beneath your station, recognizing that there is a station that you're at, a position that you've worked very hard for. But then, we'd had a conversation with a friend before, Robert, and the idea of humility that I was thinking about was, let's say that there is a CEO of a company. He's a very busy guy, insanely busy guy. And he's walking through the halls of his office, and there's a random guy who asks him a question. Now, what right does this random dude have to ask him, the CEO, like the runner of this company, a question about something inane that he's dealing with? He's got bigger problems. But the humble guy stops for a second and says, "Oh, I'm sorry. What's your name?" He learns the guy's name. He's like, "Yeah, okay, I can help you with that. What's the problem?" A guy who has 1,001 things to do that day and probably only gets 4 hours of sleep, stopping and taking some time out of his day to help someone who has nothing to do with him. That's humility.
And I would say, like, this week, God has humbled me. Like, we went last weekend to go grocery shopping, and we took all 3 of our children and went grocery shopping as a family, which I hate doing. I used to really like doing it when they were small and could fit in the grocery cart. Now my youngest Shiloh will twirl in the middle of the aisle and fall over and get hit by grocery carts and tip over displays. And it is like, I feel like Beverly Hillbillies going to the grocery store, and it is embarrassing. And we went to the store last weekend, and I got in the car after we were done shopping, and I was like, I'm so mad. And Cody's like, what do you want to do next? And I'm like, I want to go home. And there was like one more thing we needed from a different store. And he was like, oh, okay, we'll go home. And I was like, no, we're already out. Let's just go get the last thing. But you run in and I'll stay in the car, and we're never doing this again. What a waste of time. This was such a terrible day. What a waste. And then God humbled me in a way that I'm not going to share because I felt like it was between me and that person. But he put somebody in my path that I wouldn't have met if I had stayed home that day like I wanted to. Like, literally, as I was whining, I was like, stop the car. And then this whole situation passed. And then I was like, okay, I need to stop complaining, because I never would have had that experience if I had stayed home like I wanted to. And all I was doing was thinking about myself, like my comfort, like my preferences. The kids can learn how to behave themselves in a grocery store. And that's my job as the mom and your job as the dad to teach them. It's just, the patience to teach them and not worry so much. Because I get really caught up in the feeling embarrassed when Shiloh bowls over people's shopping carts and knocks over displays of things.
Yeah, it bothers you a lot more than it bothers me.
Yeah. But I never, I would have
Our kids are not that bad.
They're not. We have really good kids. But there are some moments where I'm like, I just want to put my head through the wall.
I mean, it's the idea of taking 3 kids to a grocery store. Like, if you have 3 kids, you know what we're talking about.
I get easily overwhelmed too.
Well, and you have to plan for 5 times longer than it would take if you just went by yourself.
And God help us all if someone's hungry. Don't shop hungry.
And we have to go to the bathroom in every single store.
Yes, we do.
It's
stressful.
It is.
It shouldn't be. And I could be more patient, but I never would have experienced what I experienced had I stayed home and laid in bed like I really wanted to do. And I got a Jesus spanking is what I call it, where he clearly put something in my path to be like, okay, you can stop whining now because it's not all about you. And I needed that reminder because I was being extraordinarily selfish. And that's just a small example of how I was living in the way of death. I was, if I'd continued, I would have been turning away from people in need. I wouldn't have gotten to have this reminder that God has other people other than my first world problems. So we fall into these traps, and we have to be sensitive to it because it is so easy to fall into these things. I mean, truly, lovers of falsehood, that sounds really, really bad. But when there's someone that we really care about, or a celebrity that we really like, that's just edging on the side of truth, but not really being honest, and we're rooting for them because we like them, even though they're not really telling the truth.
Well, I think this can even be wrapped up into like the whole social media thing, or, people who kind of live in a different reality for like the books that they read. And like that's just not how the world is. Like, and you're loving that persona or chasing this facade that these people put on, and it's not true. Like you're loving the falsehood. Like people don't live the way that they present themselves on social media. Like this has been proven time and time again. Like social media is bad. Like it is not good. It is like a drug or alcohol, like not only for your mental receptors and physiologically what's going on inside of your brain, but also it just makes people try to present themselves to the world not how they actually are. So I think the lovers of falsehood is there.
What do you think it means to be a corrupter of God's creation? Like, what are examples of that?
Well, I think the Jewish perspective that probably would have come to mind for what I do agree with Cody is most likely a Jewish audience would have been the creation of the Nephilim, as well as a lot of the natural evil that we see in the world that was done through the union of both humans and angels. But I don't think that's the only thing. And I think especially now with our modern context, there's a lot of corruption that we do. And I'm sure there are people who are immediately going to go, GMOs. No, not
yes.
Yes, but not, that's.
Denise, get your hat out.
But there's a lot that we've done for the sake of development that I think with the benefit of hindsight, we can all recognize isn't great. In the push for modernization, we did destroy a lot of forests and we did cut down a lot of nature's beauty that we don't have anymore. Now, that's not to say that it's wrong to seek development of the human race and to try to remove a lot of the natural obstacles that cause death. We should actively be trying to do that and increase prosperity. At the same time, we lost tons of redwoods, great sequoias, a lot of ancient trees and a lot of ancient beauty that really did deserve to be left alone. There is that kind of, destruction of nature, the corrupting of God's creation. That doesn't necessarily, we don't need to use things like CRISPR or gene editing or anything like that to do. It can just be a destroying, a negligence, because the earth has been put into our care. And I don't want to turn hippie or anything. I'm not. But
you're like the least hippie person I know.
No, but I see, and this is kind of where I would be more strict on, like, Christians should be the greenest people there are. Mm-hmm. Like, and not in the like tree hugging,
vegans,
like, vegan type mentality, because that's not what Scripture says. But pulling back to Genesis, what we just spent over a year going through, like, we are stewards of the earth and we are supposed to make it better, not degrade it. I know tons of Christians growing up who like didn't see anything wrong with littering, like just throw stuff out. Like, that is to me still correct. Like there's no need for it. That's laziness. Or like seeing something out of place and not fixing it. Like, that is
but that's not my job.
Mm-hmm.
It is. We're called to be stewards of the earth. We should be thinking green about the earth as Christians. We should be thinking about how we can preserve the creation that we were given dominion over, like, for our good. Like, it can be for our good without polluting it, without corrupting it, without making it worse. Like, one of the things, like, whenever I borrow somebody from somebody, I want to give it back better than I received it. Like, if I get a tool, I want to clean it up, make sure it looks brand spanking new when I give it back to somebody. And I feel like that's what we're called to do with the earth. Like, God didn't make it perfect. Like, the earth was not perfect. Eden was good. And we were called to replicate Eden because the rest of the earth was not what Eden was. We were supposed to expand Eden. So this idea that we were given the earth to make it better, of what God started, what God made great, we were supposed to also replicate that and make it great throughout the rest of the earth. Why do we not have that mentality as Christians today?
Well, and there are so many couples, so many Christians I know who would love the idea of like being on a homestead and raising their own animals and growing their own food. Yes, all of us here included in that. I love that idea. Gina and Cody love that idea. We've talked extensively about the dream of having something like that. But one of the big reasons for that is so much of our food, we don't know where it comes from. Or if we do know where it comes from, we just kind of roll our eyes and we're like, well, it's poison in my body, but what else am I going to do? And that's not good. It's like when you go to eat a burger at a fast food restaurant, it's factory farmed meat. Like horrible things happen to those animals. And one of the beautiful things about hunting is you know where that animal comes from. You know the cost that that animal had to pay in order for you to eat it. And so you don't take it lightly. There is a cost.
You don't waste your food. You're not throwing stuff in the garbage.
It shouldn't be that we're throwing tons and tons and tons of stuff away that we don't need to into great massive landfills. And I'm not knocking landfills because they're actually a modern engineering marvel. But the point is that the homesteading mindset that you see for a lot of people who produce online content or and actually talk about their lives on the homestead, it's completely different because it's a completely different way to live. You have to live differently. You can't just say, you know what, I want a burger today. I'm going to kill one of my cows. No, it takes a lot to do that. It took a lot to grow that cow. And for a lot of people, they become attached to the animals they will eventually eat. And so there's a sacrifice on both ends, the animal with its life and you with a connection to that animal. That's something that the ancient Jewish people had to live with as well. You remember there was the story with David where Nathan approached David about his
adulteress.
His adultery with Bathsheba. And the story that he tells him is a lamb. There was a guy who had a beautiful little lamb and he fed it from his hand and it sat in his lap and it was like a daughter to him. And then the rich man didn't have anything from his own flock. He came and took this poor man's lamb and killed it and cooked it and gave it to a visitor to eat. And David was angry. He's like, this dude should die. It's like they were attached to animals in the past just like we are now. David risked his life to save animals. He understood the value of them. It seems like today we don't have quite the same understanding of the value of the life we give so that we can live.
I think about too, like creation isn't just the earth, it's the heavens. And we've talked about it briefly in the past, but like, I think all of the satellites and things that are floating around that confuse the eye and light pollution, like we've lost access to the heavens the way that God intended us to have access to them. And in some ways, I know satellites are very important for technology and for, security and warfare. But I do feel like that is a corruption of God's creation. And one of the ways that God communes with us and speaks to us and helps us to prophesy and understand his plans in the moment. And I'm sad that we will never get to see the heavens the way that it's described in the Bible.
Well, we did cover everything. Is there anything we want to end on?
The only other thing that I had listed is just ignorance being listed as a sin. And I know we kind of touched on it. Do you think that God excuses innocent ignorance?
So evil does come from ignorance, but God has mercy on people who do evil in ignorance, in genuine ignorance. When Jesus says, Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. When Paul says that God forgave him because he acted in genuine ignorance. Evil happened in both of those instances. Paul did evil things. He's forgiven because he didn't know what he was doing. And that's sad. Like, it is a genuine tragedy that some of the worst evils that we see are done by people who don't know any better. But I think the Didache is still warning both of intentional ignorance and unintentional ignorance because both produce evil. However, I would say that intentional ignorance is infinitely worse because at that point it's not real ignorance. You're trying very hard to keep yourself from knowing something that you know would change the way you should behave. And so you try to keep yourself ignorant so you're not responsible. That's a rejection of the calling. That's a knowing rejection of God. And the fact that you aren't sure what that rejection is doesn't matter, because you know there's something more and you're trying to stay away from it.
Well, I guess in closing, what I would like to just draw attention to is if you're listening and you're like, I don't do those things. That's not me. Like, I don't walk in the way of death. I walk in the way of life. And I am innocent of all of the things on that list because I don't do those things, or I used to, but I don't do them anymore. Think again. And if you look at your church and you have bitterness or resentment or judgment in your heart for the people that are around you and you think you're better than them, or you think they don't belong with you, remember that everything on this list is something that you've done in your life. And remember that it's something they've done too. And the people who you think don't belong in your church, if you have the knowledge of the way of life and you are enjoying the fruits of the way of life, invite them to your feast. Because if you don't, and you are sitting and inactively waiting for God to be the catalyst, that person is going to go hungry because you're not doing your job.
It's cliche, but I say it to a lot of people that come to me complaining about what's going on in the church. And, you know, I can look at them and evaluate that they're not really doing anything to change that. But I tell them, like, be the change that you want to see. Like, you need to get out and do the things that you're criticizing other people of not doing. Like, you know, the church isn't active in the community. Okay. Neither are you. Like, be that change.
You are a light on a hill. What does it functionally mean to be a light on a hill? Like, how can a person go and do that? Like, for me, recently it was a pot of soup. Like, a pot of soup. I was like, Cody, should I make soup for this prayer event that we did? And he was like, no. And I was like, I'm making soup. So I made soup, and I ended up actually making 2 pots of soup. And I brought it. And at the beginning of the event, a couple of people had soup. And then throughout the evening, as the event went on, nobody had soup. And I was sad because I was like, well, I made soup. And suddenly, at the end, everybody came for soup.
As we're packing up the soup.
Yes. I'm putting it in my vehicle because it was not eaten. And then everybody comes in droves and wants soup, to the point where we're out of soup. And then I was getting text messages, hey, what's your recipe for soup? And even today, the little girl of the farm owner asked me about my soup. It's not about the soup. The soup brought people together. The soup blessed people. The soup fed cold people. And this is not like, oh, yay, I made soup. Like, it's just, that was the light on the hill for people that night who were cold and worked really hard to have this event. And it was a way for them to connect afterwards. And it was small. It was humble. And I didn't do anything extra special. It was just a pot of chicken soup. Like, let your light on the hill be your humble gift, whatever it is. It could be as small as a pot of soup. It could be as big as a sermon that God has put on your heart that you haven't taught, and you're not a pastor. So who are you to teach a sermon? But here we are. Be the light on the hill, because it's what the church needs right now. It's like in the dark, what flocks to light? All these little bugs. We're in dark. Be the light. Go make some soup.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our podcast today. If you liked what you heard, please feel free to subscribe and share and leave a positive review. And if you would like to connect with us on social media, you can do so on Instagram and Facebook at The Logic of God. You can also send us an email at main.thelogicofgod@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening. We hope you have a great day.